No serpent in the garden, no whispered temptation, no forbidden fruit ever touched. In this timeline, humanity never falls, because the being who orchestrated the fall never chose to become an enemy at all. Somewhere, in a version of eternity we cannot see, one angel never said no. And the absence of that single act of defiance doesn't just rewrite one Bible story. It unravels the entire architecture of good, evil, sin, and salvation as billions of people have understood it for thousands of years. This is what happens when the devil never falls. Theologically, the traditional story is simple. Lucifer, the most radiant of angels, the morning star, chooses pride over obedience. He refuses to bow. He rebels against the throne of heaven, and in that instant, a third of the angelic host falls with him, cast out into darkness. But strip away that single decision, and the entire spiritual war never ignites. No rebellion means no adversary cast down to earth. No adversary means no serpent waiting patiently in the Garden of Eden. No serpent means no forbidden fruit, no shame, no expulsion. The single most consequential no in theological history simply becomes a yes. And that changes everything that follows. Without a tempter in Eden, Adam and Eve face no test at all. Humanity's origin story, the one that explains guilt, mortality, and moral struggle across nearly every major civilization, doesn't unfold the way we know it. But here's the unsettling part. Removing evil's architect doesn't necessarily remove evil itself. Free will still exists in this timeline. And free will, by definition, means humans can still choose wrongly, even without a serpent whispering in their ear. So the real question isn't whether temptation disappears, it's whether humanity still finds its own way into darkness, all on its own. But this was only the first domino to fall. If there's no fallen angel woven into the earliest religious storytelling, entire mythological and theological frameworks shift beneath our feet. No Satan as a singular cosmic antagonist means no unifying symbol of evil across Judaism, Christianity, and later Islam, three of the largest religious traditions in human history, all of which lean on the idea of a fallen adversary to explain suffering. Without that shared symbol, each society is forced to invent its own explanation for cruelty, disaster, and moral failure, separately, inconsistently, without a common villain to point to. No one predicted what this fragmentation would unleash next. Without a singular embodiment of evil to blame, blame doesn't just disappear, it redirects. Increasingly, humans turn the accusation inward, or onto each other. Historians already know how communities behave when they need to explain unexplainable suffering. They find scapegoats. Witch hunts, heresy trials, tribal warfare justified not by the devil made them do it, but by the far more terrifying idea that people are simply capable of darkness entirely on their own. In our real timeline, the devil often absorbed blame that might otherwise have been aimed at kings, neighbors, or institutions. Remove him, and that psychological pressure valve disappears. The Salem witch trials, the European witch hunts that killed tens of thousands. In this timeline, without Satan as a narrative scapegoat, do these events happen anyway? just aimed at different targets? Many theologians argue almost certainly yes, and possibly worse. Now push the ripple forward another 1,000 years. Without this single event, an entire genre of Western art, literature, and moral philosophy never exists.
John Milton never writes Paradise Lost, arguably the most influential piece of English literature outside the Bible itself, a work that shaped how Western culture visualizes ambition, pride, and rebellion for over 350 years. Dante never populates his Inferno with a frozen, three-faced Satan at the center of hell, removing one of the most iconic images in the history of art and literature. Renaissance painters lose their most compelling subject, the dramatic contrast between divine light and demonic fall. Cathedral ceilings, Sistine Chapel iconography, centuries of religious art built on the visual drama of heaven versus hell, all of it collapses into something far less vivid. Without this single event, the entire symbolic structure of good versus evil as visual narrative shorthand disappears from human storytelling. But the ripple doesn't stop at art. It hits the very foundation of religious doctrine. Christianity's core narrative, sin, fall, redemption, and the necessity of a savior, depends on humanity's need for salvation from the consequences of the fall. If Eden's temptation never happens, what exactly does salvation mean anymore? Some theologians argue the entire concept of original sin becomes unnecessary. Others argue humanity would still find its own path to moral failure, just slower, messier, homegrown instead of instigated, meaning the doctrine survives, but the story explaining it looks completely different. Either way, one of history's most influential religious frameworks is forced to rebuild its central narrative from the ground up. Now consider how often the devil has been invoked not just in theology, but in politics and power. Medieval kings justified wars as battles against satanic influence. The Crusades were partly framed as a cosmic struggle against evil forces. Colonial powers described indigenous religions as devil worship to justify conquest and conversion. Without Lucifer as a ready-made villain, does the language of conquest change? Do empires need to invent new justifications for the same violence? History suggests, absolutely. Humans don't need a devil to justify cruelty. They simply find new language for it. But the specific shape of centuries of religious warfare, inquisitions, and colonial rhetoric shifts entirely. Fast forward to today, to this alternate 2026. Religious identity looks fundamentally different. Without a unifying adversary figure, the line between good and evil is far blurrier in public consciousness, less mythological, more psychological. Horror films lose their most iconic antagonist archetype. Heavy metal loses half its imagery. Halloween loses one of its most recognizable costumes. And most unsettling of all, without an external villain absorbing humanity's darkest impulses for 2,000 years, society is forced to confront a harder question, generation after generation. Not what did the devil make us do, but what did we choose to do? Maybe the story of Lucifer's fall was never really about a devil at all. Maybe it was always a mirror. One story, retold 1,000 different ways across 1,000 different cultures, built to help humanity make sense of the darkness already living inside itself. And if that's true, removing him from the timeline doesn't erase evil. It just removes our oldest excuse.